Hello! Girls mean trouble. Chapter 4. The Biggest Wave. At about 3:30 we packed all the beach things and set off. The roads were very narrow and winding, so we had to go slowly. It seemed to take ages and I was boiling hot. I couldn't wait to go in the sea. "It's busy, isn't it?" said Mum, looking at the crowded beach. "Never mind, we'll find a little spot somewhere, I'm sure," said Peter. Just then a whole family started to pack up their things about 20 metres away, so I ran on ahead and grabbed their place. "This is perfect," said Mum, smiling round happily as she slapped sun cream onto her legs a few minutes later. Charlie sat down next to her and did exactly the same thing. So far it was going just as I wanted. Mum and the girls would sunbathe, while Rory, Peter and I would bodyboard and things. I glanced over at Frankie. She had her back to the rest of us and was pulling the top half of her swimming costume up. I quickly pretended to be looking at something in the sand, because I didn't want Rory piping up, "Ollie's staring at Frankie, Mum," which is the kind of thing the little tow rag would just say to wind me up. "Come on, Peter, let's go and surf," I said. "Bit cold for me, Ollie," said Peter, sitting down on the other side of Mum. "Cold? It's boiling." "Might be boiling to you, Ollie, but we delicate grown-up people feel the cold more than you do," joked Mum. "Come on, Rory," I said, but he was fishing around in one of the big plastic bags full of beach stuff. "Where's the bucket and spade, Mum?" He sounded frantic. "Don't worry," said Mum, "it's in the other bag." "Aren't you coming into the sea?" I asked him. "Nope, I'm going to build a castle with a moat round it. You can help if you want. Did you pack 2 spades, Mum?" "I packed 4, actually," said Mum. I suddenly wished I was like Rory, a 10-year-old boy who didn't give a microchip about anything. And that's when the first shock of the day happened. "I'll come in the sea with you, Ollie," said Frankie, fishing in one of the bags for something. Don't you want to sunbathe?" I asked her, praying that she'd say yes and stay with the others. I didn't want her coming into the sea with me. It wouldn't be the same. I mean, she was a girl. Well, more like a sister, I suppose. But then I didn't really know her properly. I wouldn't be able to muck about with her, not like I do with Rory or Sam. "No, I want to go in the sea, honestly," she said, twisting her hair up on the top of her head. This time it was impossible for me not to stare. I couldn't figure out how she was going to squash so much hair into one little hairband thing, but somehow it worked. "You sure you're not just being kind to Ollie?" Mum asked her. "No, I love the sea," she answered. Now what was I going to do? I looked at the sea. The tide was pretty far out, which meant that it would take ages to get there. If it was Rory and me, we'd run fast all the way and splash each other in the rock pools. No way was I about to do that with Frankie. You never know with girls. She might go moaning back to Peter that I'd wet her hair or something. "Come on, race you!" Frankie grabbed one of the bodyboards and set off running. She left me standing there looking like a complete dork with my mouth hanging open. 2 boys who were probably a couple of years older than me walked past at that moment. They looked at Frankie, then nudged each other and grinned. They must have thought she looked nice. I wonder if they reckoned she was my sister or my girlfriend or what. I suddenly realised I was still standing there and Frankie was getting a bit too much of a start. Never mind, wouldn't take long to catch her up. Just as I was setting off with the other bodyboard, she stopped. "Keep going, I'll catch you up," I called out. She just stood there, waiting for me to work my way round all the people on the beach. When I drew level with her, she broke into a run. "I didn't want to have an unfair advantage," she laughed. "Right, Frankie, if you want a race, you can have a race." I put on a big spurt and overtook her almost immediately. Neither of us spoke for a while, but I knew she wasn't far behind, because I could hear her pounding footsteps. After a minute, the sweat was pouring down my back and my arm ached, because the bodyboard was so light that the wind kept forcing it sideways. I wish I could turn round to see how Frankie was coping with her board, but that would lose me time. I looked at the sea in the distance. There was still quite a way to go. "Want to stop, Ollie?" "What for?" "I just wondered if you thought it was too hot for running." "No, you can if you want." "No, I'm okay." Pity. So on we ran, my legs feeling heavier and heavier with every footstep. I couldn't help slackening the pace a bit, and thank goodness she did the same. So after another minute we were jogging along side by side. I hoped she'd forgotten it was a race. I hoped in vain, because as soon as we came to within a few metres of the sea, she suddenly put on a big spurt, kicking and splashing her way in, while I followed, trying to keep up. Then she chucked the bodyboard to one side and dived under a wave. "Think that makes me the winner," she said a moment later, throwing her arms up to the sky and falling back into the sea, laughing. She was still laughing when she came up the second time. "This is so brilliant, Ollie, isn't it?" I didn't answer, just started looking for a really big wave. As she'd won the race, I wanted to make sure that at least I out-surfed her, otherwise she'd think I was a total loser. My luck was in. An enormous wave was gathering up right behind me. I'd body surfed loads of times on holiday last year. You have to judge exactly the right moment to plunge forward on the board. I knew this was going to be a good one, and I was right. It was spot on. The feeling you get when the wave scoops you up and sweeps you along is really great. It took me right to the shore. That was good, Ollie, called Frankie. My go now? She didn't choose such a powerful wave as the one I'd chosen, and she took off just a moment too soon, but still managed to come quite far. You're better at it than me. I plunged in too soon, she said as she drew level with me. Let's have another go. It's great. But I was standing there with my mouth hanging open again, wasn't I? I just didn't get it. None of my friends would ever admit that I was better than them at anything, not even Sam. I suppose if I've got a best friend, it must be him, even though we don't have that much in common. He's pretty useless at sport, but really good at everything else, and he's a great laugh. So was it a girl thing, or was it just a Frankie thing? We surfed for at least half an hour, and it was the best fun I'd had in ages. Frankie got quite good at it, and said we ought to try racing. I won nearly all the races, but she didn't seem bothered. On one race, the wave shot my board right onto her shoulder. She made a sort of gasping noise, and I thought it must have really hurt her. She stood up and rubbed her arm, but I couldn't see her face because her hair had all fallen out of that thing on the top of her head. Are you okay? Yeah, thanks. I was amazed. I expected her to storm off in a big sweat, but nothing else happened. Then Rory and Charlie appeared. Hi, you two. Can we have the boards for a while? Charlie said. It was only fair that we handed them over, but I felt a bit kind of lost with nothing to do except splash about. It would have been all right with Peter or Rory or one of my friends. I wasn't sure what to do with Frankie. Last year on holiday, Rory was always jumping on me. Then he had to try and hang on while I used all my strength to try and chuck him off. It worked the other way round too, because of the water making you lighter. There was no way I could play that with Frankie, because our bodies would have touched, and that would have been far too embarrassing. I'll go back and get a ball and we can chuck it about in the sea, Frankie suggested, yeah? I couldn't believe my luck. She wanted to do all the things I thought she'd hate. It might be an idea if I got the ball myself, though. If she told Mum or Peter about her shoulder, they'd try to go and make her sit down for a while, and I'd have no one to muck about with. It was so odd that I was thinking like this. I never thought I'd find it a good laugh being with Frankie. I'll go, I said. But I was too late. She was already leaping through the waves, her knees and feet sticking out and kicking at odd angles. She really didn't care. I never knew girls acted like this. Rory and Charlie were trying to stand on the bodyboards. They were laughing hysterically because they kept falling off. As Frankie passed them, they called out to her so she didn't notice those same two boys that I'd spotted looking at her earlier, running past. They both whistled loudly as she broke into a jog. She must have heard them, but she didn't turn round or anything. They stared at her for a while, then splashed their way out into the sea. Something tightened inside me. I wasn't sure why, but I wished they hadn't whistled. And that was when it hit me. Just like being knocked over by the biggest wave in the sea. I was jealous of those boys. I didn't want them looking at Frankie like that. But then straight away afterwards there was this massive confusion inside my head, because Frankie's my stepsister, and stepsister is only a step away from real sister, literally. And you don't get jealous because of your real sister, do you? So why was I jealous? I just didn't get it. It was really doing my head in, all this step stuff. Chapter 5, Rory starts stirring. I sat bolt upright in bed. Something was wrong. What was Rory doing fast asleep in my room? Why were there two beds anyway? I blinked about 10 times to try and shake the sleep away. Then I took a proper look around and realised where I was. Of course, we were on holiday. Great, no school, no work, just beach and... That's when I remembered. Frankie. I'd been thinking about the jealousy thing right up until bedtime the day before, and when I'd gone to bed I couldn't get to sleep for ages because I was really worried. If I was jealous of those boys, I must fancy Frankie. It was totally gross. You can't fancy your own stepsister. She was practically my sister, for God's sake, so I had to get all those stupid thoughts out of my head once and for all. Trouble was, this was a brand new day and I didn't feel any different. How could I make the thoughts go away? They were stuck there. I got out of bed and was about to get dressed when I found myself smelling my armpits. Molly, you nerd, what are you doing? I'd only just told myself to get a grip when here I was sniffing my armpits. It was quite a good job I did, though, because they were a bit pongy. I went into the bathroom to see if there was any deodorant. My luck was in. I sprayed it all over me for good measure, then went back to my room to get dressed. I was just about to put yesterday's clothes on when I stopped. I might look better in something different. What? Are you out of your mind, Ollie? It was happening again. Now I was even thinking what Frankie might like me to be wearing. How sad is that? I really had to put a stop to this Frankie mania before it got out of control. I grabbed yesterday's clothes and put them on. Then I yanked back the curtains to check it was going to be a good day for the beach. The light streaming in made Rory grunt, but he didn't wake up properly. I was just about to whiz downstairs when I thought I saw some Morse code flashes through the trees across the road. I looked again and realised it was only the sun glinting. Maybe I'd tell Frankie about it, though. In fact, if she was awake, I could even show her. She'd appreciate that, I know, because yesterday evening she'd made us all go to her bedroom window and look at the sun setting. "What are you smiling at?" Rory's squeaky morning voice interrupted my thoughts. I wasn't smiling. "Yes, you were. You look really girly." I didn't bother to answer, just went downstairs, but I realised at that moment that I'd have to be very careful. My life wouldn't be worth living if Rory ever found out that I'd got a thing about Frankie. You see, Rory makes a point of noticing everything I say and do. Then he jumps on the titchiest, embarrassing thing and takes the mickey out of me to wind me up. He's got this friend called Nick. Nick's got an older brother too. And I think Rory and Nick have got some kind of competition going to see who can get up their brother's nose the most. Right, now, I need Rory around about as much as I need a broken leg. It feels like I'm under a magnifying glass. I'm going to have to make sure I don't even look at Frankie if Rory's anywhere within 50 metres. It's certainly not going to be a picnic stuck in this little house. "Mum, what are we supposed to be meeting up with Sam and his parents? When are we supposed to be meeting up with Sam and his parents?" I asked at breakfast time. "I've forgotten about that," replied Mum, her voice going all flat. "I said we'd meet them in Brinton on Thursday." "Who's Sam again?" asked Charlie. "Ollie's weird friend," Rory answered. I didn't want Frankie to think I got any weird friends, but on the other hand, it was true. Sam was weird. "There's nothing wrong with weird people," said Frankie. It sounded like she was sticking up for me, and before I realised it, I found I was smiling at her. Big mistake, that. Rory was wearing one of his lopsided grins, so I knew he was about to do a bit of stirring. Pity I couldn't reach across the table and throttle the life out of him. Throttling was obviously out, but I had to do something quickly. Instead, I stretched the smile into a sort of leer, went cross-eyed and waggled my head from side to side, so it looked as though I was taking the mickey out of Frankie for trying to be clever. Immediately, her face fell and she went pink. I wanted to kick myself, and then kick Rory for making me do that. Frankie, still blushing, got up and took her plate and mug over to the sink. "Come on, you two," said Mum to Rory and me. "Remember what we said about everyone helping?" I leapt to my feet and made a lunge for the sink because there was a small shred of hope that I might be able to put things right with Frankie, out of earshot of everyone else. "That's what he does, Sam," I mumbled when I was right beside her with our backs to the others. "What?" "That face and that waggling thing. He's always doing that. He's really weird." Frankie turned slowly to look at me. I think she was trying to search my expression to see whether or not I was joking. Her face was only about 15 centimetres from mine, and I could see the freckles on her nose, and the way her eyelashes went straight down and didn't curl at all. Everything inside me knotted up and then came back to normal again. That had never happened before. It gave me a shock. The first I knew that Rory had been creeping up on us was when his face suddenly popped up right between mine and Frankie's. "Caught you," he said in a sing-song voice. "Don't be stupid," I said, knowing that I was a bit pink. "We were just..." "What, checking for each other's zits?" said Rory. Then he nearly fell over, laughing at his witty remark. I expect the pink turned bright red, but with any luck I managed to hide it by making a dive for the pedal bin, whipping on the bin liner and going to the door. "Well done, Ollie," said Peter. "The water down here must be doing you good. I've never known you empty a bin without being asked." "It's 'cause he's getting girly," said Rory. When I came back, Rory decided to carry on with his stupid theme. "This morning, Ollie was smiling out of the window at the view. I mean, that's not normal, is it?" "It was a really nice sunrise," I mumbled, looking at my feet and feeling totally embarrassed, but desperately wanting Frankie to know that she wasn't the only one to appreciate that kind of thing. When I looked up, I found that everyone was looking at me in a peculiar way, as though I'd started foaming at the mouth. I must have gone a bit too far with my sunrise remark. I'd have to tone it down a bit in future. "Let's go to the beach," I changed the subject. "Yes, we don't want to waste a single second of this glorious weather," said Mum. Phew, close one. Chapter 6. Spit. We spent most of that day and the next 2 days on the beach. It was really weird because no matter what I was doing, surfing, swimming, playing frisbee, my mind was on Frankie. I knew it was stupid, but I kept imagining she was watching me. So say I was watching telly, I'd have to keep checking I hadn't got my mouth hanging open or anything, because if she happened to be looking at that moment, she'd think I was totally uncool. Things like picking your nose or even yawning were definitely out. Sometimes I got mad at myself for having such pathetic thoughts, and then I'd start wondering what Frankie really thought about me. She probably didn't notice me. And even if she did, she probably couldn't care less what I looked like. But she did act as though she liked me a lot. I mean, much more than Rory. And it was true that she seemed to prefer being with me to being with Charlie. But that didn't mean anything, did it? On Wednesday, the weather broke. When I woke up and looked out of my window to find it all grey, I felt instantly depressed. It looked like the beach was out, which was gutting, because that was one great place for getting away from Hawkeye Rory, and I got used to having Frankie all to myself in the sea. "What shall we do today?" Frankie asked at breakfast time. "What's wrong with the beach?" I asked as casually as I could, just in case by some miracle the others agreed. "You're joking," said Mum. "We'd freeze on the beach." "Not if you do things," I carried on desperately. "Like what?" asked Peter. "Play at frisbee or ball or build sandcastles. Be a great day for building castles," I told Rory, "because there'd be hardly anyone about, so you could make the biggest sandcastle ever." And we could get there, and I would soon convince Frankie that the sea feels warmer in the rain. "Have you actually looked out of the window this morning, Ollie?" Peter asked me with a puzzled sort of grin. I was just waiting for Rory to come out with some embarrassing comment when Charlie suddenly said, "I like it when it rains." "See?" I said, giving Peter a look. "Not everyone's as chicken as you and Mum." "I wasn't going to say that," said Charlie. "I was going to say, I like it when it rains because we can stay here and all be cosy together." "Yuck, not likely." "You don't go on holiday to stay in all day," I told her. "What about Quasar Mum, or what do you call it, an amusement arcade?" "I think it would be a good chance to explore some of those pretty little coastal villages, don't you, Peter?" said Mum. "Maybe we should compromise. Bit of exploring, bit of amusement arcade type stuff." "Yeah, or theme park," I said, trying to get Mum away from her boring sightseeing idea. "Yeah, theme park," said Frankie and Rory at exactly the same time, and at that very moment there was a flash of lightning and a giant crack of thunder. Frankie suddenly rushed over to Peter and he put his arm round her. Frankie's never liked storms, he explained to the rest of us, while she kept her face hidden. "I love them," said Charlie, rushing to the front door to look at the sky. I was thinking what a shame the others were all there. If it had just been Frankie and me, I would have had to put my arm round her, not Peter. My stomach did that tightening thing again at the thought of her being that close to me. "Let's get into teams and have a games tournament while it's raining," said Charlie. "Then go out later." "We brought quite a few games, didn't we, Sue?" "Well, we got 2 packs of cards, game of sequence," said Mum. All our names were put in a bin. Then Rory read out the pairs for the teams. It came out that he and I were together, Frankie and Mum were together, and Charlie and Peter. Just my luck. Let's hope we can get the whole thing over and done with pretty fast and then go out somewhere. I watched Charlie and Frankie marking out the big score sheet, their heads together as they leaned over the table. I'd seen Rory and Charlie with their heads like that when they'd been digging in the sand, so nobody would think it weird if Frankie and I got that close. If Rory dared to say something, I'd turn to Frankie and say, "Sorry about my little brother. He's going for the Idiot of the Year award." Yeah, that would be good. She'd find that really witty. Rory taught us all how to play this mega fast game called Spit. Only 2 people can play at once. So whoever wasn't playing played a quick version of Sequence. I didn't get to play Frankie at Spit until the very end of the whole tournament. If Frankie wins this, her team has won the whole thing. But if Ollie wins, that makes us 2 the winners, Rory said, practically jumping up and down with excitement. "So come on, Ollie," he added, slapping me on the back. "Come on, Frankie," said Mum, getting pretty excited. "Right," said Peter, "this is serious stuff. You better shake hands, you 2, before you start." My eyes met Frankie's as our hands touched, and I went all kind of dizzy. Something must have shown in my face because Rory suddenly cupped his hand around his mouth and whispered in my ear, "You fancy Frankie, don't you?" I felt like whacking him one, but I knew I had to stay cool, otherwise he'd know he'd hit the nail on the head and that would be the pits. So I gave him a "stop being so pathetic" look and started laying out the cards. 1, 2, 3, go, said Mum when we were both ready. "Come on, Ollie," screeched Rory, right in my ear. I was going much faster than Frankie, and I reckoned I could easily beat her, but I'd feel really sorry for her if she didn't win, because she'd think she was letting Mum down. "Come on, Frankie," said Mum. I glanced at the cards on Frankie's side of the table. She still had loads left to turn over, and I'd only got a few. I had to do something drastic or I'd win at any moment. Then poor Frankie would have to suffer Rory crowing about us two being the winners, and then Mum would make it worse by coming out with something diplomatic about how it was only luck anyway, when it was perfectly obvious it was a game of skill. I couldn't bear it any longer. I deliberately dropped one of my cards on the floor and then spent ages trying to pick it up off the carpet. "I'll get it, Ollie, you Wally," said Rory, diving under the table. "You get on with the game. You dropped that card on purpose." "No, I didn't," I snapped back at him, but my cheeks felt hot. "Yes, you did," said Rory. "You've gone all red. That proves it." Frankie was piling on the cards quite quickly now. Good. I only needed to hang on playing dumb for another few seconds and she'd win. "It's not fair," screeched Rory. "He's going slow on purpose." Then he turned to Peter. "This game doesn't count, does it?" "Out!" cried Frankie, clapping her hands together. She jumped up and gave Mum a big hug. Then they started dancing round like a pair of schoolgirls. "We won! We won!" "It wasn't fair," repeated Rory through his black scowl. "Ollie deliberately let her win." "Don't be silly," said Mum. "It's only a game." "He's in love with her," Rory went on in his big mocking voice. "Anyone can see that." I went even brighter red. "Course I'm not. Just felt sorry for her because she's no good at spit," I said. The moment the words were out of my mouth, I could have kicked myself. Frankie turned on me. I could see tears in her eyes. "I don't need your sympathy, Ollie," she said very quietly. I got up and went out of the room because it felt like my face had won the reddest tomato of the year competition. Rory, the tow rag, followed me all the way upstairs. "I'm going to the toilet, Rory. Do you want to come too?" I asked sarcastically. "I just came to tell you that whatever you say, I know you're in love with her, because I've heard you saying her name in your sleep. It's so embarrassing." "Well, it must have been a nightmare if I did," I snapped back at Rory. Then, just when I was on the point of going into the toilet, I saw that Frankie had appeared at the top of the stairs. She must have heard every word. And tomorrow I will continue. Bye.